I mean, huge year for what's happening over at Elliott, and it seems potentially a huge year, therefore, for AT&T. Does the letter, the piece that was put out to shareholders, did the argument of unlocking value make sense to you?
You know, I think Elliott has a playbook that they follow where they really like these long letters that really outline their case in a lot of detail. You know, they do a lot of research, they talk to a lot of people. And I think what companies, when they're facing this, like AT&T, really have to do is understand of those arguments, how much of that is really resonating with the broader institutional investor community and their shareholders as well. So I think, you know, as they think about where this campaign is heading, I think that's what we're going to see in the next couple of months, is they're going to be saying, you know, how much of this is really going to be, you know, Elliott's arguments towards focusing on a catalyst and getting some changes to happen, and how much of this is really a broader sentiment that investors are unhappy with the direction of the company.
How long does it take for this to play out? Because, I mean, these are some big proposals that Elliott's making, and, you know, selling assets in this environment is not necessarily going to be quick. This could be months, years?
Yeah, I mean, part of it, the one answer is the campaign and where this results, and one of it is actually the execution and what ends up happening out of it. I think, you know, historically you would look at campaigns and think they're relatively short, but, you know, some of these have been going on for multiple years, and especially Elliott, who has capital that they can deploy for extended periods, this may be a multi-year process. I think AT&T, you know, they had their annual meeting in April, and so if you look at it from a shareholder vote perspective, you know, shareholders aren't going to get an opportunity to have a vote probably until next spring. But, you know, campaigns are more than just the vote. In fact, most of these don't end up going to a vote. Many of them are negotiated outcomes and settlements. And so I think really, you know, the questions they've asked, the challenges they've asked are strategic. And so you know, the timing on this is really going to be how much they are able to communicate to the market that the strategy is working, or if they end up making changes as a result of this.
One of our reporters, Nabila, who was on talking about it yesterday, was highlighting that with companies such as AT&T, it's quite difficult to, well, issues have been raised for a long time, but perhaps some of the issues weren't tackled because retail investors are very big within the stock, and it's hard to build up these sorts of big chunks of change like the way Elliott Management has done. How much do you think this is something relevant for the rest of the market? And indeed, perhaps many felt, look, AT&T is doing a lot of the things that Elliott actually already mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's often a chorus you hear is from companies, is the frustration that, you know, a lot of these arguments are things that the company has thought about. I'm sure AT&T has a very well-developed M&A strategy, and they've thought through a lot of these issues. I think when you see sophisticated activists, they're not necessarily coming up to the table with new ideas. They're trying to create a focal point of ideas that are talked about a lot in the market, and maybe some investors share, in order to create some momentum and push them in a direction that they feel is going to unlock value. And so I think that's really where a lot of this is heading. And I think, you know, they're high-profile situations. It acts as a mechanism of information discovery. And so, you know, in challenging the strategy, AT&T is going to have to increase their disclosures and explain their strategies more fulsomely for these retail investors and institutional investors that are looking at the stock and saying, now there's a question that needs to be answered, and I want to hear the answer to it. So,
what about the explanation that the Business Roundtable has given, which is we're going to put other stakeholders at the same level as shareholders? Is that something that activist investors are going to respond to and accept as an acceptable approach?
I mean, I think activists are definitely going to be strong proponents of you know, shareholder value and really the primacy of that. But I also think if you look at the constituencies that boards are really having to deal with, you know, those ultimately do have an impact on shareholder value creation in the end. So I don't think that it's really a dichotomy of, you know, shareholders versus stakeholders. I think if you talk to a number of these shareholders, they still believe in the value of focusing on shareholder value, but considering environmental and social issues, or even, you know, those do end up actually having an impact on shareholder value. So I think that is something that it's certainly a topic of discussion, but I think it is ultimately shareholder value is going to be a really important component to this in any campaign.